Hello, and welcome to This is Cohousing, the Cohousing Podcast. I'm Charles Durrett, author and principal architect at the Cohousing Company. And in today's episode, we're discussing interpersonal relationship in cohousing and when it actually is a structural conflict. In other words, something that's institutionalized by the group but doesn't set individuals up for success. For example, the most common one that I see is being tyrannized by the clock. We have 5 minutes for this very heady topic, and everybody has to talk really fast. But my guest, Julia Jongkind, I think, is an expert on this critical topic. Julia has lived in 3 co-housing communities. If we're going to do co-housing well in North America, we have to learn that structural processes need to be conducive to all the goals of a co-housing, including being soft and kind. And then we're also going to talk about rebooting co-housing. And this is also dead critical because there's plenty of co-housings that have gotten started with the world's best intentions, but have waned for one reason or another. All of a sudden, they went from making dinner 4 or 5 times a week to making dinner once a week or not at all. And we all know that breaking bread together is the number one way to stitch a co-housing community together long term successfully. And questions about participation, whether it's maintenance or otherwise, all plays a big role into making everybody feel like all of this work was worthwhile. So, welcome, Julia. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you for inviting me, Charles. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, good. I'm glad to hear that. The first thing I want to talk about is this rebooting question. I had this experience a few years ago in Austria where I was invited to come back and help them reboot their co-housing community. They started off with 24 households. Everybody was like in most co-housing, it was required to cook once a month. And then 10 years into it, out of 24 households, only 12 households was cooking dinner. So I went and we set up a policy where any new person moving in would be dead clear that this is what we do here. If you don't want to cook dinner for your neighbor, there's a whole world out there. The whole world is designed for you. So why take somebody's place who wants to be in a functioning co-housing community? And so now I understand 10 years later, they are all 24 households are making dinner once a month. And that is because the 12 households who didn't want to make dinner for one reason or another segued out, and it happened to be a nonprofit project, so they could actually segue out to a rental elsewhere that didn't include cooking dinners, generally speaking. That's what those 12 households did not want. They did not want that expectation. And it worked like a dream. So, Julia, you've lived in 3 co-housing communities, and as far as I can tell, they waned. All 3 of them needed to be rebooted. So I'm curious about what your methodologies were.
A lot of my methodology involves listening and learning because co-housing was very new to me when I first moved there, and the co-housing I moved into was just starting a reboot when I arrived, so I got to learn it, as my first experience in co-housing. One of the things that stuck with me with the reboot is very similar to what you talked about, is setting expectations for the community that we all agree to and letting people select out by moving out so that the people who want to live in that community with that intention can have space to show up there. And on occasion, that reboot involves people really reassessing what they're in co-housing for and if the co-housing still matches their needs and desires for community. And also being clear that the co-housing as a group, this is still our goal. We still want to have that strong community. We still want to have that time together, and we still want to know each other well. And part of knowing each other well is making time to dine together and to do projects together.
When I visited Pacific Gardens, I don't know, 10 years ago, I noticed that it was waning. It was already in need of a reboot. That was long before you moved in. When I visited it a month ago, it felt like it was much more alive, much, much more alive. So, can you say anything specifically that you did there?
Pacific Gardens, it was a rather unique development because it came onto the market for sale right in the 2008 market crash. And so, in order
Mm,
to keep the project co-housing, most people who were living here bought a second unit and rented it out for about a decade. And we
mm,
very slowly sold those to people who wanted to be in co-housing as the co-housing got more traction in the community and the affordability matched better. So by the time we moved here in 2018, almost all of the second units had been sold to owners. And so having more owners in the community and that commitment to co-housing made a huge difference in how much we were able to shift the needle from holding on to co-housing by a few households to having all the households involved in creating that co-housing together.
That makes sense.
And one of the parts that we did have to do as owners, because my mother-in-law's been living in the project since the beginning, so we've been involved with the project for a very long time. One of the things we needed to do was look at how our community meetings were running and reset those to a more communicative and equitable meeting space rather than following a more hierarchical meeting space that we'd fallen into the habit of over time due to lack of participation and lack of people wanting to really pour into the community because renters often aren't as invested the same way owners are.
Wow, that's dead important.
And to be fair, there are renters who are 100% as invested as owners or more so. For our community, we had a very large number of renters, and some of the renters were higher turnover, which pulled away from that community cohesiveness. So it's a little harder to hold the co-housing space when not every unit was involved fairly equitably. And so with that dynamic, renters didn't necessarily feel they had to go to strata council meetings or community meetings because they were just renting there. Or part of their rental agreement didn't include a lot of the community work that we do as part of our community. So renters might not necessarily feel that they needed to be part of doing the grounds and landscaping or part of doing the monthly cleaning because they were renting. It wasn't a place they were investing in the same way.
And maybe they were more used to landlords who took care of the common space.
And partly because there were so many rental units, people needed to have renters in, so they weren't necessarily renters who were coming for co-housing, but renters who were coming for housing, and that's a very different place to come from. And so part of that rebooting is cleaning up why are you in co-housing, and why
Mm.
is co-housing attractive for you as a person or a family?
That's so key, and a lot of folks want to see more rentals in co-housing, which is great,
Yes.
and you're right, there's no reason that that alone would take away from your participation as long as you have strong expectations in that direction.
I think renting is a fantastic way to be part of co-housing. And the part we have to remember, same with ownership, is I'm not coming to co-housing to own a strata unit. I'm coming to co-housing to be part of a wider community. And when
Right,
that's your focus for why you're living there, then whether you're renting or owning matters less, much less.
right.
It should not at all.
You know, what we've done, largely because we had a half a dozen renters during the pandemic as well, we have been helping those people buy a house. And the reason for that is the mortgage can actually be the same cost as rental nowadays.
Mhm,
And you don't have to run the risk of some owner selling their unit, raising the rent. You get a mortgage and that's a fixed rate or similar.
mhm,
And by the way, just for clarity, strata in Canada means a condominium, just for those below the 49th parallel listening to this podcast. You know, it's so funny because a lot of co-housing communities are mystified by this question of rebooting. They are, and I'm so glad that you have embraced it because it's just a design problem. I mean, it's not as hard as it looks. I was in Australia and I said, "We gotta get all 24 households cooking, there's no doubt about it." They were just like, "Really? Can we do that?" "Well, why can't you do that? Of course you can do that. You just have to figure out how you're gonna help set these individuals up so that they can set the group up for success." A couple people did start cooking because they wanted to stay, but when it became clear that this group really wants to be a co-housing group, they didn't go through all this trouble just to wane and be regular condominiums. So then a couple of households got motivated to start cooking, etc. But the other household said, let somebody in here who wants to live in co-housing. So you can't think of it as negative. They're kicking me out. Think of it as if I don't want to cook, there's stratas all over the place if you don't want to cook for your neighbor. But let those who want to cook for their neighbor live here.
I think one of the things that really helped is at our community meetings, we started facilitating a little differently. In our community meetings, it's great to do popcorn where people just pop up with what they wanna say and it's out of order,
Yeah,
and
right.
people really feel enlivened by that kind of debate. And one of the things we needed to do for about 2 to 3 years straight was to change all of that to rounds, so every single person was able to speak and be heard.
Hmm, interesting.
Because then what we found is the people who spoke a lot had time to think and really consider what they wanted to say, and those who spoke rarely were given space to speak up without
Hmm.
feeling they had to jump in or have to be quick thinking to be part of the discussion. And so even shifting that piece of facilitation really brought everybody together better. We
Hmm.
weren't overwhelmed as a group by the 5 or 6 more talkative people.
I hear you. I'm assuming the facilitators make sure it's always on topic.
Yeah, that was part of the facilitation for sure. The questions were usually quite specific, and often the facilitator could repeat back what they heard so that the person understood they were heard. And if there was more, they had a chance to add in or change what they had said on the spot.
Right on.
That validation was critical.
Now, one of the troubles I find is things like, I just want to say I agree with what Joe said. There's a bunch of lobbying that goes on.
So, with that one, what we tried to do is if you agree with somebody, show them while they're talking by twinkling your fingers. And then you don't have to say that. And it allows our group to use our time better. And people can visually see, oh, that's something I resonate with. That
Yeah.
helped with the lobbying.
And you could argue, I think, that it helps the facilitator recognize that there's some juice behind this notion. So why don't I start taking some straw polls? Okay, what I see is that we want to have, you know, 3 guest spaces instead of 2. And I often will just cut to the chase and say, does anybody disagree with 3 spaces? In other words, people who might not have twinkled their fingers might have agreed when it becomes obvious that this is probably the way we should go. So does the facilitator see that twinkling as a segue to straw polls?
We rarely use straw polls in our community. So, no, I could be used that way for sure.
When you do the twinkling, I mean, you're basically doing a straw poll.
Can be seen that way. Instead of doing straw polls, we often do more of a temperature check. So those are who are more in agreement, neutral, or definitely disagreement. And then people who are in disagreement usually have state their reasons so that it's definitely heard what the concerns are. So that as we move forward, we are aware of those concerns that need to be addressed and if they are addressable.
Mhm. So at Yarrow Eco Village, I mean, the reboot there between you and Jonas was phenomenal. I mean, you guys had built only 4 houses in 8 years, something like that?
I don't remember the
It
exact
was
numbers.
something like that, and we needed to build 33 houses, and as I recall, you guys were $700,000 in debt, so Kate and I came up and played a big role and said, "Okay, if you're really gonna get this project rolling, it's gotta look like this." But I think you had other issues to accomplish, like, group process and such there.
Yeah, we definitely had process issues to look at, and we also had a lot of community building activities to create to ensure that the people who were coming in or the people who were interested had things to come to that would show what co-housing was like before we were even built.
Interesting.
One of the ones that we did fairly early on was to start a meals program 3 nights a week. That
Mhm.
program is pretty straightforward. If you were eating on Tuesdays, you sign up and you're just assigned a week in the rotation, and at the end of the rotation, you either sign up again or depending how your schedules change, drop off. In the rotation, you cook the one night, and then the other nights you show up and graciously accept whatever's been made, and there's
Mhm.
no monetary accounting on that.
Wow.
And so if people are coming to join the dinner from outside of our community, we would put them in touch with who is the cook for that night, and they could coordinate what they wish to bring as a participation. So they might bring a salad or they might bring a dessert, something small to add to the meal that was already planned by the cook that night.
One of the things that you're suggesting is that signing up for the meals and signing up to cook was very easy. We use a software in our co-housing community that just seems to befuddle people, especially the older people,
Mhm.
and it creates an inertia. Meanwhile, I was visiting another community up in Port Townsend, and I'm amazed how many co-housings in general just have a binder in the common kitchen and just says, "Sign up to cook and sign up to eat."
Yeah. That's wonderful when it gets to that point. When we were starting the program in Yarrow, I went around with a clipboard to every house and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we're doing the signups again. Which night are you wanting to be there on?" And then I'd write
Oh,
their name down and say, "I will get back to you with the schedule once I have everybody signed up."
that's cool.
So it was a personal invitation to you specifically to be part of this
Right.
wonderful part of our
It's
community.
beautiful. In fact, you're making an argument I love, which is why not make it personal?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, why not be more like the Iroquois Indians who did not have software and did not have email and did not have what becomes impediments to natural human experience? Face to face, hey, dinner's on Tuesday is lasagna. And I don't know if you've ever tried her lasagna, but it's amazing. And you really gonna want to be there. I mean, I don't know anything wrong with that.
I found through experience that if I want something to happen in our community, I will personally talk to enough people to get momentum to make it happen.
Now you're making another argument here, which is having some chutzpah. Well, the first thing is, again, in my opinion, getting back to this is a design problem. The second part is the chutzpah. And the third part is really just being the elder. I mean, our co-housing in Emeryville went off without a hitch, all the common meal issues and even maintenance, largely because we had 3 women in that group who did not shy away from being an elder, and I didn't think about how important that role was because I used to think that co-housing is just egalitarian and we're all gonna be the same, and I really feel that way, of course, but I admire people who don't mind reminding others, "You said you were gonna cook last month," or, "Hey, you haven't done anything on the maintenance or the cleanup." That was Emeryville. We had 3 women who were not shy. That was really what it boiled down to. And I'm not saying everybody stepped in line, but if I failed to get signed up for dinner, like, late month, Fran would sign me up. "Chuck, you're signed up to cook Tuesday the 2nd." And I go, "What? What? I have this meeting. I can't." And then she'd say, "Well, you better find somebody to trade with." And so she put the onus on me to fulfill the basic responsibilities that I had agreed to in writing that said I would cook dinner once a month. Basically, what she was saying to me as an elder, "I'm gonna help you be the person you wish to be." And that's what elders do.
Yeah, and that's the flip side of what I was talking about. One of the reasons we chose to live in co-housing was to have that human connection. So going to people individually and talking to them invitationally to be part of what our community is doing on the human scale is the beginning. And then the flip side of that is, oh, you've agreed to this. How can we humanly support you in doing what you want to be to bring out that best self for you, which is what you're talking about with the elders in the community doing.
Yeah.
So you start with the invitation and making it attractive, and then knowing that when you say yes, you will get support to get to the end where you want to be as well.
That's a perfect point. You know, when I was on the meals committee, we would knock on people's doors and say, "Hey, you guys haven't had a chance to cook the last month. What can we do to help you to cook this month?"
Yeah.
And we'd say, "Do you need childcare? We'll arrange you some childcare just so you can fulfill this and you can participate with us at dinner, etc."
Mhm.
And it's so funny because every time we ask people, "What can we do to help?" they would cut to the chase right away. They would say, "Okay, we get it. You wanna help, and we'll ask you for help if we need any, but otherwise, we understand that it will help our family too if we,
Mhm.
participate."
One of the quote unquote selling points of the community dinners is if I cook every night of the week, I've got to spend about an hour on prep every night of the week. If
Yeah.
I'm only cooking once a month, I've now freed up 25 hours for me on those nights I don't have to cook because I'm at a community dinner.
Not to mention, there's also shopping, and there's cleaning up, and there's all the other stuff that goes with getting a dinner on the table.
Mhm. And that's just the daily task, not the weekly or the monthly pieces as well.
Right, exactly.
Often when you're cooking the community meal, there's other people helping you, and it's a social aspect, and I'm not in the kitchen on my own convincing one of my children they should help mom.
Yeah, right, and all the wear and tear on the dishwasher at home, I mean, if people really looked at all the ancillary costs at home, the dishwasher that we have in our common house is industrial grade. It's bulletproof. You know, changing out my personal dishwasher does not appeal to me. So what did you do at Windsong to help them?
Windsong, I was a participant. It was my very first co-housing. I was a very young mother, and I had no idea what co-housing was at the time. So
Okay.
as we were going through the reboot there, we had Diana Leaf Christian in, we had Tree Bresson
Oh,
in, we listened to them, and we really implemented a lot of what they suggested that we either had never implemented before or had fallen off our processes.
yeah.
One of the things that touches back to what we talked on earlier, when people are interested in co-housing, we really invite them to come and participate as a guest. So they will come to a community meal and meet who their neighbors will be. They will come to a work party and get to work with people and have those casual conversations. And they'll be invited to both fun events and work events. So they have the balance of what happens in community. And we always invite them to community meetings because our community meetings are not run like a standard stratum or a condominium meeting because we do use a consensus process. And there's different forms within that you probably want to know about before you're required to work within that system. And so, in
Mm.
having all these options for people to understand the community, it lets them decide, yes, this is where I want to live because of the people, or this is not something I'm ready for at this time in my life. So, that self selection into or out of the community really makes a huge difference on how connected that community becomes over time.
Gotcha. That's great. It seems like stating somehow that we have a Lamborghini here if we choose to operate it. And there's no reason to us to limp along with an old horse because we have a Lamborghini if we just do a little bit of maintenance along the way. What do you suggest in the way of maintenance along the way that helps people drive their Lamborghini instead of a limping old horse?
That's a really great question. One of the things I find that helps me in community is having frequent, short, and small group interactions.
Hmm.
One of the things that I enjoy 3 days a week is a community coffee time,
Hmm.
and I go out and have coffee with my neighbors at about 10 AM a couple times a week, and we just chit chat. That gives us an informal way of checking in with each other, and it's very often the same people, which is nice. Later in the day, I can see a group of people doing Tai Chi together. They get to check in with each other, or they're having bridge in the afternoon, or there's a boards games night on Thursday night that people pop into, or a Magic the Gathering night for a different group of people. And seeing those different pockets of community that have overlapping people with different interests is really where that maintenance comes in. So small frictions can get worked out, and the sense of community that I'm really involved in a space that's alive with people who want to be together is quite visible in that regard. If I ever wanted to learn Magic the Gathering, I have no doubt they'd be thrilled to teach me. So I don't feel like it's a closed group at all either.
I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about causing. I mean, we have games, and I'm not
Mm.
kidding, like every night.
So that's
But
awesome.
there's a half a dozen to a dozen people there, and they're so welcoming to teach
Mhm.
you all these games. It's crazy to me.
We have a knitting club as well and a hiking club, so it's things that go off the property as well.
Oh,
The
right on.
hiking club goes out, once a week and does a local hike. So those are other ways to connect. But that's the kind of maintenance.
Yeah,
Co-housing is about the community itself. And so to maintain a community, we need points of connection. And
yeah,
if we're not setting ourselves up with activities that create connection, then we become the same as the apartment block down the road.
exactly. You nailed it. And I feel that the one connection that can get lost so readily is breaking bread together. It's not just about sustenance. It's about, hey, what are you doing on the weekend? I'm thinking about going skiing. Do you want to go? I'm thinking about taking the kids to the zoo. Can I take your kids?
That's one of my favorites. Yes, you can take my children. Have a great time.
Right, exactly. Well, they will entertain you. I mean, I know your kids. They're very entertaining. Are there any other thoughts that you have about rebooting? Because this is the kind of questions that I get all the time.
One of the ways that I've been part of rebooting co-housing is to sit down with the group over multiple sessions and really work through what our group values are, what our group goal is, our mission and vision statement. Mission
Mhm.
and vision statements will change over time. And if we as a group don't come back and tend to those, then we have a mission and vision that no longer matches our community. And so we don't have that guiding star to help us with our decisions and our activities in community. In Diane Leaf Christian's book, I can't remember which Building a Life Together, she has a process she goes through, which I've used in the past, and it's been really good at sussing out what are the unspoken values in our community? How do we make those visible and obvious to each other? And how do we refer back to those when we have those conflicts that feel like they're tearing us apart?
Hmm, good. You have a saying, people need a place to contribute as they can and a place that allows individuals to accept what is offered with gratitude. It's brilliant. What do you mean?
So that one really resonated with me when I was working on the meal program in Yarrow. We had a variety of people in Yarra, which was great. So we had lots of people with time, with money, we had people with skills, and we wanted to make a space where you could contribute something that you were comfortable contributing. And the space also for people to accept what was being contributed. So there was a big effort made for the meal plan in particular for people to simply know whatever you wish to cook is great because you're cooking it for us and we are grateful. And so whatever I choose to cook, then people are then expected to be like, "Thank you for cooking dinner. I love that it's pasta and salad because that's what you can do." Whatever my skills are for that task is what I can do.
Great point. In fact, the meals committee, which I'm on, we put a little poster around the common house that said, "Our agreement for meals says that it's okay to be simple."
Yeah.
Because I was concerned that we were getting to be a little bit of a glorified dining club.
Mm.
People felt like they had to make six-course meals, and they were. It was kind of amazing.
Some people want to do that because they thrive there. And I will accept that with
Exactly.
gratitude as well and not
Okay.
feel like I have to match that energy.
That's perfect.
That's a working piece for a lot of us. Me for sure.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's a good point. That's where people bring their creativity to the fore. That's
Mhm,
where they bring their gratitude to others to the point where you feel like, "Wow, this is made with love, but
mhm.
so is my rabbit stew," or whatever somebody brings.
I got my one pot chili meal that's really amazing
Yeah.
because, it's made with love, and my neighbor has their smoked salmon on a cedar plank meal, which is amazing, and it may be that though I make a one-pot chili meal, might also be able to power wash the stairs every year, but my neighbor can't. They're really good at cooking, but power washing isn't something they can do, and so
Right.
that's another place in community where we accept what we can give and don't judge people for not being able to do something, because we all have different places where we're gonna shine.
Right. You have expressed that it's very possible when there's interpersonal conflict for that to arise out of the macro
Mhm,
structure. And, the most common place I see that get in the way of an easy interpersonal flow where I live is we didn't put enough time on the clock to adequately process a question. We said 10 minutes and everybody gets all hyper, and it turns out to be 15 minutes, 20 minutes. The facilitator has learned to extemporaneously just say, "Can I add 10 minutes to the agenda?" They facilitate that clock better than we used to.
mhm.
What are structural problems that you see from time to time?
That timekeeping in a meeting can create structural problems because sometimes we will feel rushed to make the decision, and the decision may be in conflict with a previous policy we have in place. Now we have X happening here and Y happening here, and when they meet up, it's a structural problem in our decision logs, but it ends up looking like Jamie and Joe don't like each other because they're
Mm.
standing from different viewpoints within the same overlap area.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to spot and describe at times.
Yeah,
Once you
interesting.
understand how to see it, it's easier to spot.
Yeah, and hearing that person A doesn't like person B after a meeting, when you know that that's not the case, but it looks like that.
Yes.
It looks like that because you know for a fact that they have done a great job of cooperating over the years. And then all of a sudden, there's a friction that was not necessary or maybe necessary just to work it out. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is there's nothing about an argument that means that we're trying to win over another. It has everything to do with finding the best solution for all. And usually there's a little friction with that along the way. Being comfortable with the friction is something that I think we need to learn how to do. I mean, some people are so conflict adverse that the smallest amount of friction, you just see the hair go up on the back of their neck.
Mhm.
And yet we're just working it out.
When we have conflict adverse people and people who love the drama in the same room, it's really helpful to have every statement come to the facilitator and only the facilitator so they're not cross talking with each other.
Hmm.
That slows down the energy. slows down the emotion, and it really lets the people who are conflict adverse have space to express themselves in what feels like a safe container. And those who are excited about whatever we're having conflict over also directs it just to one person. And so that really reduces the spillover of feelings, which often impacts how we communicate with each other. So the
Mhm.
facilitator really takes on a lot in that role.
Mhm. Interesting. When we first started out, I noticed that there was a lot of meeting that was addressed after the meeting. For example, can you believe that Joe said this and Jane said that to a third person?
Mhm.
And so we decided to have a little exercise where we stood in one big circle and every individual in the group went up to every other individual in the group and said, "Hey, Julia, if I annoy you, which is probably going to happen eventually, I would really appreciate it if you would just come and talk to me about it. I'm giving you permission to approach me and say, Chuck, but the last workday you were pushy, or I really hate the way you park your car. But if you're not comfortable directly talking to me about it, bring a friend, a witness. And if you're afraid I'm going to cry or raise my voice or something, just bring a friend. I promise I'll be on my best behavior because I really have to listen." That really got rid of a lot of gossip. I think about 85% overnight.
Yeah.
There are people who argue that that exercise should happen more frequently because new people or it slides a little bit.
Mhm.
End of the day, if you
Mhm.
can't listen with an open heart, then you're going to have some difficulty living and causing. Would you agree with that?
Yes. 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah, right, right.
I am of the group that thinks that that invitation to come and talk to me directly if I've done something that's got you irritated, please do come tell me, and the sooner the better,
Yeah,
because I want you to be happy and I want to be comfortable living here, and part of that is our communication. One of the things we do in our community meetings is when we do our opening, we often will have people pair up with somebody near them and we'll have a question to answer. One of my favorite questions is, "What vehicle did you learn to drive on? Tell me about that." And then the stories start coming out and you know your friend, your neighbor at a more personal level.
right.
And those questions are not related to business, but it's building those connections as you get to know people. If we can do them on an ongoing basis, those questions are really building that feeling of, I know these people.
I mean, it's no mystery that if you don't maintain something, entropy will win over and
Mhm.
everything will fall apart. And for the community to hold you in the way that we hope it would, place where you know and care about and support each other, it needs maintenance. And that maintenance can be as easy as an adjustment, like going to the chiropractor. I mean, the number one thing, in my opinion, is the design. And Pacific Gardens feels like it really works from a design point of view because you have that one atrium. It's one building.
Mhm.
Pacific Gardens is one building. You see each other frequently and you say hello, and there's lots of seating. And it's one of those places where I feel like management happens on the sidewalk. Like, hey, who left that lumber in the parking lot? Let's just go move it. It can readily occur.
No, I think maintenance comes down to building those community connections on a regular basis, and small is just as effective as large. Often
I
more
know.
so because you can maintain small connections for longer than doing large ones less frequently.
Amen. Yeah, when it becomes an emergency, it's not much fun. We have to go do something big like a ropes course, which we've done in our co-housing community. People dropped and people caught you,
Oh,
building
wow.
up the whole trust thing again.
We've not done that.
Can you think of other structural things that could potentially set the group up for success so that interpersonal difficulties do not emerge unintentionally?
Taking time with your decisions and really thinking beyond the immediacy of the decision. An example for that is, let's say that we want to change up our garden structure. What would that physically look like? And what are some of the unexpected ways that may change how we use the space now? So if we go from individual garden plots to long beds where you get so many feet of it, how might that change how the entire garden is used, and not just for the gardeners, but anybody else in the garden? So right now we do our Easter egg hunts in the garden in the spring, and having the separate beds leaves a lot more nooks and crannies for the eggs to hide in. And as a gardener, I often find chocolate eggs in my garden later in the year because the kids aren't always great at hunting. But if we change it to very long rows, that might impact the Easter egg hunt in a way that we wouldn't have thought of because it's a once a year event and it's only for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Interesting.
stepping back from the immediacy to looking at what's the bigger picture over the year and other users of the garden, making time for that discussion and having those conversations at coffee, at meals, so you can really just kind of wait for it to emerge over time as people recall, oh, we did this in the garden. That wouldn't be possible if we changed it. Some of that history as well being able to be shared and not having it all crammed into one meeting.
Yes, I get you. That's a really great example. We have a big, lovely vegetable garden, but
Mhm.
it's on a slope, and the kids used to toboggan there when it was snowy. Well, when the snow's happening, we don't have anything growing in the garden, of course. So they've kept it so that we could take the fence down and the kids can toboggan right through the garden. It is amazing to see the joy. At first people were going, "What? Really? We got this great vegetable garden. We're gonna have the kids toboggan on it?" The laughter and the screaming is so palpable. Everybody went, "Okay, fine." And it turned out to be just such a boon for everybody.
And and what you said, there's some people who are like, this is a garden space. This is how a garden space is
Yeah.
used in a structural conflict with we have kids in the community, and this is how kids use space. And
Yeah.
they are both valid viewpoints. And if we
Yeah.
can't find that middle ground somehow, that becomes an interpersonal conflict very quickly.
In the making.
Yeah.
In the making, no doubt about it.
And taking that time to hear everybody, to validate their point of view, and then come up with a joint solution,
Right.
which takes
Right.
it takes time and patience.
Amen. Yeah. Julia, how would you say co-housing has affected your family? The trajectory of your family, the quality of life in your family? Julia has 4 kids,
Me
by the way.
too. I have 4 children. We moved into co-housing when my oldest was 1-year-old. And we knew at that time that we would either be moving into a house in the suburbs or we were gonna try co-housing for a year to see if it was okay. I didn't know much about it. My husband, Jonas, was pretty keen on it, and so I said, "Alright, we will try it for a year and see how that goes." It was quite a growth curve for me living in co-housing. There was so much to learn. So many expectations had to change from where I had started, and it was beneficial for me as a parent. And that support and connection in the community really helped my children. They ended up having connections with a wider variety of people, more frequent playtime and more everything that you could want. My husband and I both grew up in small towns where we had free range everywhere for quite a long time, and co-housing created a space for that as well within our current culture and society. And so the kids were free range within the co-housing, which taught them a lot of skills that they may not have gotten living in a suburban home, which
Mhm.
would have been our other choice. So just from that structure alone, the kids have benefited. Further to that, though, my youngest is now 14. He spends an hour a week with our neighbor who had lived in Japan for most of her life, and he's learning Japanese from her. And they have a great relationship. They're speaking in Japanese. They do Japanese cooking together because he's also interested in cooking. And she loves hanging out with Roman. She had no children of her own, and for her, this is a wonderful experience.
That's fantastic. And Roman is a special kid. They're all special.
Everybody in co-housing's awesome.
All kids are special. Sometimes it's hard to bring it out. I honestly believe that co-housing brings it out. I mean, it's basically an immense amount of fertilizer which helps that person grow like they might not have otherwise. My daughter obviously grew up in co-housing,
Mhm.
and as soon as she graduated from college, she started working for the UN. It was incredibly easy for her to get people organized. She went to Africa and organized all these projects, and she was just a born organizer because she had grown up in co-housing,
Yeah.
and she saw everything as a design problem. If kids are having to go look for firewood at midnight for their house, well, we have to rearrange that and create and get on the market clean cook stoves, for example.
Yeah.
It was obvious there was something to do.
And one of the other things I noticed with, anyone who lives in co-housing is our communication skills get better. So the children learn how to communicate with people beyond their age group and beyond their peer group, which means they're pulling skills from people of all ages and experiences. And we
Yeah.
also do that with the adults in the room as well.
Yeah.
I definitely pull skills from other people and implement wonderful, wild things I see other people doing more frequently because I can see them doing more in co-housing than I would if I lived on a cul-de-sac or in a different apartment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's an estuary of sorts. You have influences from so many different directions and education from so many directions that is not about going to get a book and studying something. It's about listening and caring and so many basic human behaviors.
And to be fair, as my profession is teaching, I'm
Mm,
always on the lookout for where I can learn.
amen. Yeah, I was listening about how you try to set these kids up for success in their careers. I've been learning a lot about it, and I really want to have that conversation with you sometime. It's completely different than co-housing, but I'm really
It's
curious.
it's kinda different, but I think I learned a lot of those skills in co-housing as well.
Makes
Like, to
sense.
be able to ask those questions of people.
You know, one part I love of my job is how many people tell me that the skills they learn living in co-housing are the skills they take to their job, to their church, to their bicycle club, you name it. That's a perfect segue into my next question, which is how has co-housing affected you personally?
That's a good one. For me personally, I am confident that co-housing has helped me become a much calmer and more deliberate person. I react with more care and consideration than I did before I lived in co-housing. I'm also, a lot older now too, which might be part of it.
Hmm.
And it also helped me be able to set boundaries for myself and hold them
Mhm.
because co-housing is going to be work in building relationship and setting boundaries in relationship. It
Mhm.
would be wonderful if we could all be just get along and everybody's best friends and it's easy, but it doesn't work that way. And so my interpersonal skills got a huge upgrade living in co-housing
Mhm. Cool.
through conflict.
Mm. And through love. I mean,
Yes.
I have to say that I'm so astounded by how often people extend gracious gesture to the point where it makes me feel like I want to be more gracious and I want to be more giving. Over and over again, I get that lesson.
Mhm.
What do you think that co-housing has to offer the world?
I think co-housing really creates a strong container for building a community. And what you put into that community is what a part of the world is looking to build. So the co-housing is a container to build the microcosm of the community and the larger world you want to see.
Mm,
Like a
mhm.
little seed pod that's now going to grow and spread.
Hopefully.
Well, I always hope for that because if there's only 400 co-housings, that limits where I can live. And I want to live everywhere.
Right. But I'm so impressed by how many people in my co-housing community volunteer in the larger community. And I do that. You know, I became a teacher of English as a second language only because some person in my community encouraged me to do that too. What question do you think I did not ask that I should have asked, Julia?
The only other one that's kind of fascinating to me is I've noticed on occasion when the community is really struggling, it helps to have an outside expert from further away because the further somebody is away, the more authority they seem to carry.
Hmm.
And that's
Interesting.
a fascinating bit of human nature, but it can be used to really help restart and reboot that community.
Yeah. And or it's a new voice
Yeah.
or it's a new perspective. And people are kind of, we're kind of stuck. So we need a new perspective.
Yep.
I find a lot that people are really open to a new perspective. If they're afraid they haven't heard it, people stop listening to the familiar voices. And so it's somebody from outside who's reinforcing that point.
Could just be the exact same thing said in a different way.
Exactly. Absolutely. Wow. Well, I hope you don't feel like you've said everything because I want to have you back. I'm very happy with this discussion. So thank you
Well,
so
thanks,
much.
Charles. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here, and I'm
All right.
happy to have more conversations around co-housing.
Okay, well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if this conversation resonated with you at all, consider subscribing, rating this episode, sharing it with somebody interested in living in a sustainable neighborhood where people know each other, care about each other, and support each other. And as always, you can find more information about everything that Julie and I discussed in this episode description, along with our website, where you can find books, courses, and other events. Please consider signing up for the newsletter. And I want to give a quick thank you to the production team here at the Co-Housing Company, Not the Chai and Melissa. Until next time, I'm Charles Durrett. Thanks for being part of this conversation, and thank you, Julia, for making the conversation rich and meaningful.
Well, thank you for inviting me here, Charles. It was a pleasure.
You're more than welcome. Until next time, see you later.